Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture number 18 and the title of this lecture is Essay from Beacon to Lamp. This lecture is part of the course History of English Literature, New Classics to Date. I am your teacher Muhammad Asif Khan, lecturer, Department of English, Cohort University of Science and Technology. Dear students, agenda for today's discussion is that first of all, I will give you definition of a word essay. Then we will look at the history of this very word, and after that we will discuss the list of important essayists from 16th century to 19th century. The main part of today's lecture will be discussed in the end of this lecture, and that is the most important part. In this part, we will discuss the important essays of English literature, and in this discussion, we will look at the brief history of all these colossal personalities. So let us start from the question that what is an essay? The word essay is basically derived from a French infinitive, that is the word essayer, and it means to try or to attempt. From this very French word, the word essay came to the English language, and now we define an essay as a short piece of writing, and this very piece of writing states or articulates the information as well as the writer's opinion on that very subject. An essay basically presents the outlook or the judgment of the writer on any section of the knowledge. So essay came from the French word, and it basically means to attempt or to try, and we see that this is a short piece of writing that basically articulates knowledge as well as the viewpoint of the writer. Let's move towards the basic history of this very word essay. As I told you that the word essay, it came from the French word, and we see that the word essay was for the first time used by a Frenchman for his writings. And from there, we see that a new type of writing became known to the people, and that Frenchman was Michel de Montaigne or Michael de Montaigne. He was born in 1533 and he died in 1592. So he belongs to 16th century, and in this way we say that he was the first writer who described his works as essays. And we see that he basically used this very expression or this very term for his works as attempts to put his thoughts or ideas or beliefs into writing. So basically he was attempting, or he was trying to put his opinions and beliefs into writing. And for this reason he used the word essay for his writings, because he was trying or he was attempting to write down his thoughts. So in England, the origin of essay is basically linked to Francis Bacon, and he is often credited as the first great English essayist. He published his essays in the form of a book in 1597, and this very date is only 5 years after the death of Montaigne. So very important that very soon after the initiation or after the origin of essay in France, we see that Francis Bacon introduced this very new genre into the English literature. Now we will look at the important essayists from 16th century to 19th century. Actually, there is very long list, but I have included some of the important essayists, and these very essayists are Sir Francis Bacon, born in 1561 and died in 1626. So he was contemporary of William Shakespeare. The second important name is Joseph Addison, born in 1672 and died in 1719. He is accompanied by his close friend, Sir Richard Steele, born in 1672 and died in 1729. After that, we have very important name, and we already discussed him in the literature of 18th century, Dr. Samuel Johnson. 1709 is the date of birth, and 1784 is his date of death. After that, we have William Hazlett, 1778 and 1830. Charles Lamb, another important name, 1775, died in 1834. Two important personalities. Basically, they are not in the domain of today's lecture, but because they are the important essayists of the 19th century. So I have included these two also in this discussion, and we will very concisely discuss both of these essays. And these essayists are Leigh Hunt, 1784 is his date of birth, and he died in 1859. Thomas De Quincey, 1785 his date of birth, and 1859 his date of death. So dear students, now let us look each and every essayist individually. The first essayist and the most important one is Francis Bacon. As I already told you that his date of birth is 22nd January 1561, and he died on 6 April 1626. Bacon was without any doubt the father of the essay in England, and we see that he is also considered as the father of empiricism in England. And what is empiricism? Basically, it is the theory that all type of knowledge or the wisdom is based on the experience, human experience, and we derive all these forms of knowledge and wisdom from the senses we have. So knowledge is based on the experience that is derived from our five senses. Now we will look at the most prominent features of Bacon's essays, and the first thing is that his essays are compact, and these essays are full of the wisdom of experience and his strong observations. And another important feature of Bacon's essays is that he included or he covered the different features of human life in his essays. And we see that he incorporated the topics which are ranging from truth, religion, beauty, friendship, marriage, and we see that he included the topics like architecture. So that is the wide range that he included topics from all aspects of the human life. When we look at the Bacon style, we see that he has an aphoristic style. An aphoristic style means a very compact and condensed style of writing. It means that he is very concise and just focusing on the subject which he is dealing at that very time. In style, we see that he used Latin and Greek quotations because he has very sufficient knowledge of these classics. In style, his correctness of the similes or the suitability, the way he selects or he chooses the suitable similes in his writings, that is very outstanding. And we see that he uses very sharp turns of phrases, and he uses compressed expressions but these very expressions are having heavily loaded lofty ideas and thoughts. And he used apt similes, witty phrases, and his expressions are full of thoughts, but compact thoughts. All these features make his essays a superb piece of writing. Two important characteristics linked to the characteristics I already described to you, that he uses terseness of expression, and terseness means brevity, shortness, and abruptness of expressions. Along with that, he uses epigrammatic gravity. Epigrammatic means conciseness and to-the-point expressions. And these two, the terseness of expressions and epigrammatic gravity, are the two most important characteristics of his style. Now, we will look at another important essayist, and he is Joseph Addison. Date of birth is 1st May 1672, and he died on 17 June 1719. He was an English essayist, poet, playwright, and politician. As I told you in the introduction of these very prominent and significant essayists, most of the time his name is remembered along with Richard Steele, who was his very close friend. Important feature of his prose style is that his prose style, that was basically a simple prose style, it marked the end of the mannerism and conventional classical images that was very common in the 17th century. And we see that he is the person who ended all such type of things in the prose works. We see that in April 1709, Richard Steele started the Tatler. It was a magazine, and these two friends, Richard Steele and Joseph Addison, were writing essays in different editions of these magazines. But the most important thing was in Tatler we see that Addison contributed only 42 essays to the Tatler, while Steele wrote 188 essays. This very magazine, it discontinued, or its publication was ended on the 2nd January 1711. Another important sequence of publication or magazine was The Spectator, and it started its publication on 1st March of the same year. It means that 1711, and it continued until 6th December 1712. In this very magazine, we see that Addison contributed 274 essays, and the total number of essays was 635. On the other hand, Steele wrote 236 essays. So we see that the contribution of Joseph Addison is increasing, and he is now on the equal standing with his friend. After that, we see Addison also helped his friend Steele with the publication of The Guardian, another magazine. This very magazine started in 1713. And now we will look at Sir Richard Steele. His date of birth is 12 March 1672, and he died on 1st September 1729. So first of all, I will give you introduction that he was not only an essayist, he was an Irish writer, playwright, and the most important thing, that he was a politician. Very close friend, as I told you earlier, and he was the co-founder of the magazine, The Spectator. Steele's first journal, The Tatler, came out on 12 April 1709, and after that we see that Addison and Steele together founded The Spectator in 1711 and The Guardian in 1713. So that is the basic contribution, that he started a tradition that has very strong roots, and this tradition is still there, and we see number of magazines and journals are still going on publishing on the different subjects of English literature. Now let's move towards one of the most important personalities, and especially an essayist, and he was Dr. Samuel Johnson. We already discussed Dr. Samuel Johnson when we were studying the literature of 18th century. He was born in 1709 and he died on 13 December 1784. He was a very prolific personality, and we see that he was an English poet, playwright, essayist, moralist, literary critic, biographer, editor, and lexicographer. All these things. He is writing poetry, dramas, essays. He was dealing with moral subjects. He was a critic, biographer. He was editing different magazines. And along with that, the most important contribution by Samuel Johnson is that he was compiling dictionaries. So he is the most important person who is doing all these jobs. When we look at his career as an essayist, we see that The Rambler was the periodical, strictly a series of short papers, and it was from Dr. Samuel Johnson. Another series of essays, that was The Idler. In this series, he published 103 essays, and we see that all but 12 of them, it means that if we subtract 12 essays from a total number of 103, we will get the numbers which are being published by Dr. Samuel Johnson. These essays were published in London weekly, and the name of that weekly newspaper was the Universal Chronicle, and it was published during 1758 and 1760. So that is the contribution by Dr. Samuel Johnson. Now we will look at a very important name, that is William Hazlett, and he is born in 1778 and died in 1830. He was an essayist, drama and literary critic. He was painter, social commentator, and philosopher. So now when we look at the criticism, we see that he is considered as one of the greatest critics and essayists in the history of English language. Another thing which is being accepted, that he was one of the supreme art critic of his age. So that is the important characteristic of William Hazlitt. As an essayist, he is classified as a romantic essayist, and like other important essayists, he also wrote very diverse type of essays, and he selected a very vast range of topics. So we see that he is inquiring into that human life, and he is discussing the different aspects of human life. And the most important thing is that he is most of the time concerned about the varieties of human life. Another important characteristic of Hazlitt is that he is very keen observer, and especially observer of life. So his essays are serious in nature, and we see that these grave essays are basically thought-provoking. And these essays show the philosophical inclination of the mind of William Hazlitt. Now let's move towards another great name, that is Charles Lamb. And as I told you that basically we were discussing from Francis Bacon to Charles Lamb. He is one of the prominent essayists, as I listed here that he was an English essayist, but it was not the only quality which he had. He was also an English poet and antiquarian. So we already know that antiquarian means relating to or dealing with antiques or rare things. Charles Lamb was a very close friend of the most prominent writers of the Romantic age. He was friend of Coleridge, Southey, Wordsworth, and Hazlitt. So the best known essays or the best known work of Charles Lamb is Essays of Elia. And Elia is basically a pen name which he adopted when he was contributing the essays to the London magazine. As an essayist, when we try to evaluate the the qualities or the characteristics of Charles Lamb, we see that he brought to prose a very supreme quality of romanticism. And in his essays, we see that reader appreciate the essays of Charles Lamb because of his knowledge, his wisdom, and his concern for the humanity, and the passion of the kindness and compassion which he has in his essays. Another important feature of his writing is that he is having a very friendly, warm and welcoming, or a genial humor in his writings. And he has very deep and profound pathos in his writings. He is also famous for his charming and sweet temperament, and the most important thing is that the technique of writing which he is using in his writing is very important. So that is all about Charles Lamb. Now let's move towards James Henry Leigh Hunt, very important personality in 19th century. He was born in 1784 and died on 28th August 1851. We see that James Henry Leigh Hunt is commonly known as Leigh Hunt, and he was English critic, essayist and poet. Basically, he served as an editor of the following magazines, and the names of these very important magazines are The Reflector, and this very magazine started in 1810 and continued up to 1811. The other important magazine is The Indicator, that started in 1819 and ended in 1821. The third magazine that was edited by Leigh Hunt was The Champion, and the duration for this very magazine is that it started in January of 1828 and that magazine discontinued in July 1828. When we look at the contribution he did as an essayist, we find that from 1814 to 1817, Leigh Hunt and William Hazlett, they wrote a series of essays in the magazine The Examiner, and they titled these very essays as The Round Table. Later on, these essays were published in 2 volumes in 1817 as The Round Table. When we look at the contribution of Leigh Hunt, we see that out of 52 essays, 12 essays were written by Leigh Hunt, and the rest of the essays out of 52 essays were written by William Hazlett. So that is the contribution of this magnificent writer. The last essayist is Thomas Panson de Quincey, and he was born on 15 August 1785. Date of death is 8 December 1859. An English essayist, and most of the time he is known for, and he is famous for his work Confession of an English Opium Eater. That very work was published in 1821, and this work, The Confession of an English Opium Eater, is the best known work. It is based on the autobiographical sketches of De Quincey. In his writings, especially in his prose writings, we see that the style of De Quincey is that he created rhythmical prose. That means that he combined the best elements of the prose and poetry in his writings. And when we look at the rhythmic element in his writings, most of the critics of that time, they said that he had command of rhythm more than Milton's command. So that was the quality of De Quincey. Another important feature of the style which he had in his prose was that speciality that he was describing the incidents of purely personal interest. And the language he used for these very personal interests was according to the magnitude of that very. So his essays on the principle of literature are original and insightful. we see that these very essays are penetrating into the minds. So these are the characteristics of the style of Thomas De Quincey. Dear students, so that is the end of today's lecture, and in today's lecture we discuss the definition of the word essay, and then we look at short history of this very word, and after that I have given you a brief intro of the most important essayist of the English literature. And this very discussion started from Bacon, then I included two friends, Joseph Addison and Sir Richard Steele. After that we studied Samuel Johnson, and that was followed by two important essayists, William Hazlett and Charles Lamb, and in the end we discussed Leigh Hunt and Thomas De Quincey. So that is the end of today's discussion. Thank you very much, and see you in the next lecture.